What's that you say? Why is it that you are dressed today like John Calvin? Why are you dressed in a thoroughly Calvinistic fashion? Ah, well, let me explain. I saw an absolutely brilliant film recently, which I think that everybody should see, called Planet of the Humans. It's extremely good, and the basic idea of the film is this. The population of the Earth is going to collapse. The population of the world is going to collapse as a consequence of climate change, because the world is going to get the population is going to get too big. We won't be able to sustain the population, and this will result in there won't be enough energy. We will run out of energy, and there's going to be a massive population collapse. We won't be able to sustain the massive population that we have. That's the first point the film makes, and the second point that the film makes is that renewable energy, things like solar power and whatever, can't help. And indeed, it argues that solar power and related renewable energy sources are actually a scam that produce hardly any energy at all, and that are ultimately reliant on traditional means of producing power that are going to run out, and that are increasing, that are filthy, and that are causing pollution and all this kind of thing, and that consequently they're just a scam. They're just a way of virtue signalling that you're trying to do something, and they're a waste of time. So those are the two key points of the film. The population of the Earth is going to collapse because we're going to run out of resources and due to climate change, and renewable energy simply cannot save us. The amount of energy that it produces is absolutely tiny. We can't sustain it, and so consequently the population is going to collapse, and basically lots of people are going to die. Now, in this film, a person that made the film did a very interesting interview with somebody called Sheldon Solomon, who is an anthropologist of religion or something like this, and he made a very interesting point, which I thought was absolutely fascinating, and it really encapsulates what's going on. It really encapsulates the two reactions to a film like this, and the two reactions to the environmentalist movement. Basically, two fundamental responses. The first is that fossil fuels will last forever. We have always found ways to deal with these problems. We're not going to run out of fossil fuels. We're not going to be destroyed by global warming or whatever, climate change. We're not going to have any problems because the population is too big and we can't sustain the population. There will be no problems. The optimistic way. We've always found a way in the past. We always will find a way. Everything is ultimately going to be okay. So let's just get in our gas guzzlers and get on with it. And the second response is of course the panic, the idea that no, this is a problem. We're going to run out of fossil fuels. We won't be able to sustain the current population. There's going to be a crisis where we can't sustain our current standard of living, and we're going to collapse. There's going to be a huge population collapse, and lots of people are going to hurt. These are the two fundamental responses. And what he argues is that this can be seen in basically religious terms. They are two kinds of religion. They are religious ways of seeing the world. They involve belief. One involves belief that goes on forever, basically, and the other, in a way, the belief that God will provide. The belief that it will all be okay in the end. God will always provide us with his bounty. All we have to do is carry on worshipping him, and God will provide. Now, the other belief is the belief that we must do things to appease the gods. Now, this can ultimately be reduced down to the difference between Calvinism, or the doctrine of Calvin, and the doctrine of Arminius, who was another theologian. The doctrine of Calvin is essentially that everything is in the hands of God, and that humans can have absolutely no say in their own salvation whatsoever. God decides before all time who are his elect, who will go to heaven, and who will go to hell. God decides that before all time, and so humans can have absolutely no influence whatsoever on whether they go to heaven or hell. God has decided before all time who goes to heaven and who goes to hell, and this can ultimately put down to the idea that there's nothing we can do. God will provide. That's that. We can't have any say in our own salvation. The alternative view, the Arminian view, or is the view of Pelagius as well, is that we can have some say in our own salvation, that we can act in such a way to ensure that we are saved, that humans have free will. They can choose whether or not to become Christians. It's not God that decides whether you become a Christian or not. It's you that decides whether or not you become a Christian or not, and therefore you can have a say in your salvation. These are the two fundamental things. And so one of them is basically saying we don't have to do anything. We're either part of the elect or we're not, and God will provide. And the other one is saying we do have to do something, and if we don't do something, then we could go to hell as a consequence of not doing something. These are the two fundamental ways of seeing things. Now, that is a very fundamental division in how you see the world, and ultimately it can be seen as a religious division. Do you trust that everything will always be okay? Do you have an essential optimism, or are you of an anxious disposition, taking the view that no, you must personally intervene, you must personally do something to bring about your own salvation? And this argues, or implies, this person Solomon, who they interview, is the fundamental difference between the two camps, the fundamental difference between those that completely ignore what is perceived, what he perceives in the film to be some sort of crisis whereby we're going to run out of fossil fuels, we won't be able to sustain our current lifestyle, and consequently there will be a huge population collapse. And the view that we can do something, we really can. We can carry on having, to some extent anyway, a high standard of living, but we have to change our way of living, and we have to engage in these new forms of renewable energy. Now, that's extremely interesting. It's a very fundamental difference in how you see the world. Now, what this can ultimately be reduced down to, really, is two rather different instincts, two rather different cognitive adaptations of dealing with the world. Now, I looked at in another video on how there is a degree to which we are still evolved to living on the savannah. There's evolution sped up once we left the savannah. Evolution became more intense once we left the savannah, the Pliocene, and entered the Holocene. But there is a degree to which we are still evolved, because evolution, it all happened so quickly, we are still evolved to hunter-gatherer bands. We are still evolved to the situation on the savannah where we live in small bands of about 40 people that are all related and all know each other. And under that context, certain instincts, if you like, were selected for. Certain ways of thinking were selected for. And there are two rather fundamental instincts which differ from each other, which have been selected for. One is basically follow the leader. And the other is all work together. Or what we might reduce it down to is hierarchy versus egalitarianism. So on the one hand, we are evolved towards hierarchy, and we are evolved towards living in a hierarchy, and therefore and it's been found in computer models and whatever that groups that are more hierarchical and so on, and are more quickly led will be more likely to sort of survive under Darwinian conditions. And therefore we are evolved towards a belief in hierarchy, a desire for hierarchy, a desire to be led, and it's also a desire to rise to the top of the hierarchy. But either way, there is a strong evolution towards obeying the leader, and lots of experiments. Milgram's experiment, for example, where he manages to persuade people to electrocute perfect strangers in another room to the point of believing that those strangers might be dead, is an example of just how evolved we are to obey hierarchy and to trust in hierarchy. The other is that because we evolved these hunter-gatherer bands, these bands were more likely to survive in the battle of group selection against other bands if they were highly internally cooperative and highly externally violent. They had to be internally cooperative. They had to get on with each other. They had to work together. The groups that were better able to work together in pursuit of resources or whatever were more likely to survive. And so we end up with these two fundamental instincts: the instinct to obey the leader, to try and climb up the hierarchy, to accept hierarchy, to like hierarchy, and to obey the leader, and the instinct to work together and cooperate and whatever. Now, what religiousness has done is it has taken all of these adaptive instincts, all of these highly adaptive instincts, things to which we are evolved, not just hierarchy and egalitarianism in the correct balance, but lots of other things, such as the desire to have children, the desire to make sacrifices for your group, the desire to love your in-group over your out-group, all kinds of things. And it makes those things the will of God. And because those things are the will of God, then they are more likely to be adhered to. And so religiousness is essentially this adaptive thing. And so what we're seeing kind of implies this film, or implies this Sheldon Solomon who's interviewed in this film, is two religions. And now religions are, of course, a composite of these different instincts, these different adaptive instincts. And you're going to get some religions that are more pushing towards what we call hierarchical instincts, and some religions that are pushing towards more egalitarian instincts. You're going to get differences in the extent to which the religion promotes different kinds of cognitive adaptations that are adaptive under Darwinian conditions as the will of God. We're going to get differences in how strongly some are promoted over others and how strongly some are focused on. So you're going to get within the category of religions that have survived under Darwinian conditions, you're going to get this variance in how strongly these things are adhered to and how important they are. And so it makes sense that within the broad category of sort of religious instincts, of religious thinking, you will get some people that push more towards an egalitarian way of thinking, where we all need to cooperate for our own good, and this instinct will transfer into a religion that says that we make sacrifices to the gods, that we have to do things to appease the gods, that we have to act together to help the gods, and that we can do things to make the gods help us. And on the other hand, you might get a different way of religious thinking, which will say that no, the gods will always help us. It doesn't matter. We don't have to do anything to assist the gods. The gods love us. The gods are on our side. The gods are wonderful. We don't really have to do anything. The gods will always help us. We must simply do what the gods want. We must trust in the gods. We must trust in the leader. And so you have these two, the dear leader. So you have these two fundamental ways of thinking. Now, both stressing the degree to which you adhere to both allows you, in a sense, to move up the social hierarchy. It allows you to gain social status, and we are evolved to want to gain social status because under Darwinian conditions it's been found that until about 1800 the richer 50% of the population had double the surviving fertility than did the completed fertility than did the poorer 50% of the population. And so this meant that basically if you were rich you passed on your genes, and if you were poor you didn't pass on your genes. And with this it's been seen in hunter-gatherer bands that the headman, well, the chiefs of let's say the Kalahari, the Bushmen of San, they will have large numbers of wives and large numbers of children. And as you move down the social hierarchy, the men have smaller numbers of wives and smaller numbers of children, because the women sexually select for status. Because if the husband has status, then he'll have more resources to invest in them and invest in their child, and therefore they'll be more likely to survive. And so therefore they sexually select for these men that have high status. And so therefore there's a strong incentive built into us to want to move up the social hierarchy, because if you don't move up the social hierarchy, then you're in trouble, then you won't pass on your genes. Even though that's not the case anymore, that was the case for much of our history. Now, these two sets of instincts that are a part of religiousness, of course, allow you to do that through signalling, through, if you like, virtue signalling. Should we call it two kinds of virtue signalling? So in the case of the egalitarian instinct, it is literally virtue signalling. You are signalling the fact that you are highly cooperative, you are highly pro-social, you want to cooperate with other people, you want to do what is morally good and what is perceived as morally good. You want to, in religious terms, do the things that are morally good that please the gods. And of course, the gods are inherently pleased by what's morally good because they decide what's morally good. So that's the virtue signalling aspect, and that's what these people that are the egalitarians, that are the climate change activists, that are the let's all do something about it. That's what they're into. And then of course you have those that are saying, let's not do anything, it's all going to be okay, I'm absolutely confident everything will be okay, we don't have to do anything. Well, those people are not virtue signalling, but they are signalling something else. They are signalling their bravery, they are signalling their certainty, they are signalling that they are self-assured, they are signalling their confidence in God, their confidence that God is blessing them. They are almost, you could argue, they are power signalling. So they're not signalling the same thing. But these are both ways of attempting to move up the hierarchy, and so you can see why people would engage in them, although it may be the case that it is more successful in a highly pro-social species to virtue signal than to bravery signal or to power signal or whatever you want to call it. But that's what both of these kind of groups are doing. So both of these reactions to this climate crisis or whatever, to this crisis in the world of resources that is highlighted by this film, are reactions which can be understood to be religious in nature. And that's why the reactions are so fervent, that's why the reactions are so dogmatic, that's why the two groups tend to hate each other, because in evolutionary terms they are very different strategies. And so the kinds of people that would be pushed towards an egalitarian strategy and the kinds of people that would be pushed towards a strategy involving hierarchy and so on would be very different from each other genetically, and therefore they would be competing with each other, and they would be of different genetic frequencies overall, and consequently you would expect them to intensely dislike each other. So that's the first thing with the then highlights, which is why they hate each other. And the second reason why they do is because we are also evolved to have structure. We don't like uncertainty. Uncertainty makes us anxious and it makes us unhappy. And religiousness tends to hit in at times of low structure, at times of uncertainty, at times when we're stressed, at times when we don't understand what's happening, at times when the world is unpredictable. That's when religiousness tends to hit in, and it gives us structure and it makes us feel better. And so in one case you have people whose the religion that makes them feel better is egalitarian, and in the other case the religion that makes them feel better is the one that is the hierarchical one. And people will get very upset if you question their religion because simply by disagreeing with it, simply by disagreeing with the dogmas of their religion, you are demonstrating to them that they might be wrong. You are undermining their certainty. You are undermining the structure, the certainty that is relieving them from their anxieties. And so consequently, and he highlights this in the film, they will tend to get very angry and very upset if you do that. And so that is why it is very difficult to have a rational debate with these kinds of people about the issue of climate change, because they are religious in nature. The kind of character they have is religious in nature, and they have adopted really a form of religiousness involving dogmas and things they are certain of and absolutely certain of that give their world structure, in which everything will be okay and they have no need to worry about the future of the planet. On the one hand, it's the fossil fuels will go on forever, things can only get better, God or the world or Gaia or whatever will always provide model and everything's going to be okay. And on the other, it's everything's going to be okay if only we cooperate and do these certain things, engage in these certain rituals for the appeasement of the gods. Then everything will be okay and it's all fine. Two fundamental worldviews, Calvinism and Pelagianism. The problem is they're of course both empirically wrong. And this is something that the film doesn't look at. Both of these worldviews are linear. They see the world in linear terms, and in a religious sense, they have a Christian idea or a Judeo-Christian idea that things can only get better, that time moves in a linear direction, things always get better, and they ultimately end in some kind of utopia where things are perfect. Now, both of these worldviews see things, although there are humps and bumps along the way, but essentially things get better. Both of these theologies see the world in this kind of way. As far as the people who are the bravery signalling types, the Calvinists are concerned, I think ultimately we're moving towards a utopia where we're all going to live in space and live on Mars and colonize the universe and everything's going to be fantastic and fine. As far as the people who are the Pelagians or whatever are concerned, well, that's not necessarily going to happen, but certainly things are going to get better. Certainly, life is going to become better, more diverse, more egalitarian. Everything's more like a kind of perfect tribe, really, and we can achieve this perfection and this justice and this jubilee if we just all cooperate and engage in these certain rituals. And the way we need to do this is by using renewable resources so that Mother Earth doesn't get so upset and get so hurt, and then we can sustain everything and everything's going to be wonderful. So both of them have this linear view of history, that things get better. And it is simply not congruous with the facts. Now, we can see why this way of thinking might have evolved, both in terms of the more egalitarian view and in terms of the hierarchical view, but this way of thinking that is fundamental in the West, this linear understanding of history that you see again and again and again, that you see in Christianity, because it gives you a certain degree of confidence. It means, in a sense, that even if you do think that the gods will provide, you're not fatalistic. There's no belief that things are going to get worse. You have a confidence, you have a bravado, you have a belief in the future, you have a belief that ultimately a utopia is going to be reached. You have something to strive for, and you can see that once this way of thinking developed in the religiousness of Western peoples, that it might be kind of selected for, because it would be adaptive, it would be useful, it would give the group the bravado and the confidence to expand further, to take risks and whatever, and there wouldn't be this fatalism that you find in religions that are polytheistic, where the belief is that there are cycles, the worlds rise up, worlds reach a climax, worlds fall, and then the cycle happens all over again. But that's perhaps why it's really kind of unique to the West. We have we don't have a cyclical view of history. We have this linear view of history, and this perhaps explains why Christianity and Christian civilization has come so far. Why it has risen so high partly anyway into the heights of the Industrial Revolution and all this kind of thing. Why it is that we stayed religious for so long, when normally societies lose their religiousness before reaching Industrial Revolution and then start to decline. So that perhaps could explain why it's been selected for, and why this inclination is so strong in Western societies. And what the film fundamentally ignores, though, the film's essential argument, as I said, is that the population is going to collapse. We're going to run out of fossil fuels, and we won't be able to sustain a huge population. It's going to be mass starvation, not enough food, lots of people are going to die, and whatever, and the population will collapse. And that fossil fuels won't, and the renewable energy won't help you with that, because it's just a drop in the ocean. But what it doesn't look at is why this is the case, because in theory we could go on forever. In theory, we would expect. It's not that we would run out of fossil fuels. I mean, there are new things that we've discovered subsequent to fossil fuels that could replace fossil fuels, such as nuclear energy and things like this. And there may well out there be lots of new things that we haven't even thought of, that we haven't even conceived of, that we could discover, and we could carry on growing. The population can get larger and larger and larger. If we couldn't sustain, if Earth couldn't sustain the population anymore, we could go out into space. We could colonize other planets and whatever. But all of these things are reliant on intelligence. Intelligence is the key predictor of socioeconomic status. It's the key predictor of the status and the standards of living of a society. And we know, and we look at this, you can look at in the book by myself and Michael Woodley and me, At Our Wits' End, Why We're Becoming Less Intelligent, What It Means for the Future, that if you look across time, from the Dark Ages up to about 1800, we were clearly becoming more intelligent. And this was evidenced in the fact that the level of per capita innovations were increasing and increasing and increasing. The level of per capita genius was increasing and increasing and increasing and increasing. And it's obvious why it was doing so, because there was a strong correlation between how wealthy you were and how many surviving children you have. And how wealthy you are correlates with how intelligent you are. And so what was going on was that it was bootstrapping the population every generation. Every generation, the poorest people died out, the least intelligent people died out and didn't pass on their genes. The most intelligent people disproportionately passed on their genes. Intelligence is highly genetic, about 0.8 genetic. Socioeconomic status has been found across time, between the medieval period and 1950s, to be 0.7 heritable, 0.7 to do with genes. And so we were clearly becoming more intelligent every generation. We were selecting for intelligence under these harsh Darwinian conditions, because if you weren't intelligent and you didn't pass on your genes, your children all died young. You couldn't provide a good conditions for them, and they simply died out. Now this changed with the Industrial Revolution, because the levels of Darwinian selection were heavily, heavily, heavily weakened. And so the first thing that did was it meant that the children of the poor did not die out. And so promptly, within 100 years of the Industrial Revolution, there was firstly no longer a relationship between intelligence and how many surviving offspring you have. And then it became, with the innovation of contraception and various other things, more intelligent people more likely to use contraception. And therefore it became, large families became a matter of an accident and of stupidity, and consequently there became a negative relationship. And since then, intelligence has been going down. And that is what is ultimately going to cause the population collapse, which is highlighted in the film. That is the mechanism by which things are going to collapse, because we will no longer be able to come up with new. And the population would increase on the back of the Industrial Revolution. We know that per capita innovation is going down and down and down and down, and we are now back at the level that we were in 1600 when Queen Elizabeth I was on the throne. But even so, because of the huge explosion in technology and whatever, and medicine and so on, which was set off by the Industrial Revolution. It's rather like building up capital. We've built up this capital like a very wealthy person, and we can keep it growing just by minor tinkering, even though we're not doing any major inventions anymore to make it massively grow, just minor tinkering. But eventually, as we become, that requires a certain degree of intelligence to do that. And as we become less intelligent, we won't be able to engage in the minor tinkering. And eventually we won't be able to do things we used to be able to do. And it's possible that we can't use Concorde anymore than we used to be able to do it because of declining intelligence. And then we will start eating into the capital. And then once that happens, then of course eventually the capital will run out. And when that occurs, then life will start to go backwards. We're all becoming less intelligent. We'll be less able to do the things that we used to be able to do. And once that happens, once we can't do the things we used to be able to do, we won't be able to sustain the levels of current medicine that we have. We won't be able to sustain the levels of public health that we have. We won't be able to sustain all of these things that sustain a huge population. And the population that we are sustaining is an increasingly less unintelligent and increasingly genetically ill population. And there's good data on that because, of course, child mortality until 1800 was about 50%. And child mortality is now 1%. And so what this means is that since 1800, all of these people that wouldn't have survived under agricultural conditions have had children, and so have their children, and so have their children, and so on. And so this means you have all of these people who are reliant on there being a high civilization with high levels of technology and high medical services and all this in order to survive. They are reliant on that system. And it's all ultimately based around the ability to keep up the energy, to keep the energy, to keep the lights on, to fossil fuels and whatever. Now, once those things run out, and what the film indicates is those things are going to run out, we will cease to be able to sustain our current lifestyle. There won't be enough fossil fuels to do so. Then you would expect a collapse. So that's the mechanism of collapse. The reason why we would collapse is because we are going down in intelligence. If we were continuing to go up in intelligence, or even if our intelligence was staying the same, then it's possible we would think of new ways of dealing with the problem. We would be able, for example, to come up with some new system of some better system than fossil fuels of creating energy. But we can't do that. Or we would be able to leave this planet and go and colonise other planets with their fossil fuels, and therefore there would be no population collapse. But because our intelligence is going down, we are not going to be able to colonise other planets. We probably can't even get to the moon again. We probably can't even get Concorde in the air again, because intelligence has declined to such an extent. And so, therefore, there will be a collapse. But the film, like there always has been in the past, civilizations have always risen and fallen. And what always happens is that the civilization goes up and up and up. It's under Darwinian conditions. It selects for intelligence. It becomes highly intelligent. It reaches a certain level of decadence. And then you have people in the cities who have a high standard of living, who have high intelligence. And for some reason, once people get to a certain level of luxury, they stop wanting to have children. It's the people that are the most intelligent, who are in the upper class. They reach that level of luxury first. They stop wanting to have children, and therefore the intelligence of the population declines, and therefore the civilization goes backwards because it becomes less intelligent and is therefore less able to sustain the high civilization it's created, and consequently it collapses back into a dark age. And this is what has always happened throughout history, and it is happening to us. Now, it is a step forward that this film has had the bravery to critique both of the religious perspectives with regard to the whole climate change and fossil fuels issue. It's a step forward, but it would have been wonderful if he had dared look at why it is that we can't go on forever. We could, in theory, go on forever. In theory, the Calvinist group could be correct. In theory, if we were becoming more intelligent, or at least if we weren't getting less intelligent, then perhaps we could go on forever, but finding new ways, solving new problems, finding new resources, going to different planets and whatever. But that's not going to happen. And if you want to read more about that, then you can have a look at my book, At Our Wits' End, Why We're Becoming Less Intelligent and What It Means for the Future. Well, anyway, I hope this is a bit of interest. Do watch the film. Do please subscribe to this channel. This film is being violently strangled. This channel is being violently strangled by YouTube and by the anti-freedom, anti-science people. You all know who they are. So please do subscribe to the channel. Hit the red button to get notifications. We live stream live at 7 o'clock on Mondays and Thursdays on here. You can find this stuff on BitChute, and you can find everything on BitChute, on my BitChute channel, so please do subscribe there. And if you want to be very, very nice, then you can see how you can support me in links below. And I will see you soon, and goodbye.